Good afternoon. I call to order the October 1st, 2021 Student Achievement and District Instructional Performance Committee meeting. This meeting is actually going to be an information-only meeting since we do not have a quorum for our SAC meeting, so we will begin with information-only reports from our instructional team. Members of the public who wish to speak may do so by clicking the chat button now. The chat feature will be open for your request for 5 minutes. Please submit your name, your affiliation to the district, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you want a direct response to any questions you might have. We will begin with our first agenda item, students with disabilities, English language learners, and individualized educational plan referrals. Ms. Christine Reeves.
Thank you. So I did take the liberty of adding a few slides on our gifted students because I didn't want them to be left out, but I'll be short and sweet on that presentation. So, there you go. Thank you. Okay, so if you could go to the next slide, please. We use gifted assessments to screen students who we think show potential for performing at high levels in one of these areas: superior cognitive ability, specific academic ability, creativity, and visual and or performing arts. Students can be referred to this by themselves, by a parent, by a school staff member. Almost anyone can refer somebody for a gifted assessment. And then we have a variety of different screeners that we use to test the students, including group assessments, individual assessments, auditions, etc. If you can go to the next slide. In the fall of every year, though, we screen all second and sixth graders using the IO assessments to assess for giftedness in specific academic ability, and using the COGAT to screen them for superior cognitive ability. We do that every year in the fall, and it's actually coming up soon. If you go to the next slide, the next steps are what happens is that parents are notified within 30 days of those screening results, and one of three things can happen. Either the student meets the gifted threshold and they're identified as gifted, they do not meet the threshold and they're below the screening level and they are not identified as gifted, or they fall within a rescreening range and they will be rescreened with a similar assessment just to double check that there was not an anomaly in those results. If you could go to the next slide, please. Some of the supports that we then offer those students include things like whole grade acceleration, individual subject acceleration, AP and college credit plus courses. Dr. Rudnick has done a fantastic job of offering supports for students who are gifted in arts, and we also have Spencer Center and the Cheviot Gifted Academy. And just for your information on the next slide, this just gives some information on the numbers of gifted students in each of those different categories and how many we have in the district altogether. So then if we move on to our English learners, that process is a little bit different. As soon as families enroll and register, if you take a look at the next slide, any family that checks a language other than English during their enrollment process, those students are automatically screened using a test that we refer to as the OELPS because we like to use acronyms for everything. At the beginning of the school year, that happens for all students within 30 days. And as they enroll throughout the year, we do that within 2 weeks of their enrollment. Parents are notified within 2 weeks of those results, and if it's appropriate, a limited English proficiency plan, or what we call an LEP plan, is written for that child, and they are served by our fantastic ESOL staff. So some of the, if you could go to the next slide, please. One of the populations of students that I wanted to talk about is our students with limited or interrupted formal education. We refer to them as SLIFE students. They just have a slightly different process in that any student who enrolls in our district as an unaccompanied minor or a refugee is automatically evaluated for SLIFE status through an interview with the student or the parent. And then we recommend for them, if they qualify for that status, we recommend one of the more intensive EL programs at one of those fantastic schools that you see on your screen. But on the next slide, you'll see we have a variety of supports because we know that our students are more than just the newcomers and the SLIFE students. They're a diverse group of students, and we have a continuum of services that meet their needs, and that goes from sheltered content classrooms and co-taught classrooms through push-in and pull-out supports in the classrooms, all the way through progress monitoring of students who have been exited from services and consulting with gen ed teachers. We also have programs that you've heard about from other folks who have presented, like our dual language Spanish immersion classes and our heritage language Spanish instruction classes in some of our buildings. And then again, here's some numbers, and this is broken out by the level of supports that the students receive. The students who need the most intense supports are at the top, and it goes all the way down through students who are in a monitoring process for 4 years after they've exited, because we're still responsible for monitoring their progress. And I just do want to note, even though I don't have last year's numbers on here, we have almost 200 more English learners at this point in the year than we did at this point last year. And they are enrolling every day. So I just wanted to make sure that we saw that those numbers are growing significantly. Finally, if we take a look at the way students with disabilities are identified, this is a very different process than the other two groups of students. The Individuals with Disabilities Act, which I will refer to as IDEA from now on, has something in it called Child Find. And the essence of that is that we are required to identify, find, and evaluate any students living within our boundaries who are suspected of having a disability. Not just students who attend our public schools, but students in any school that is within our district. And if you click on the next slide, and you have a handout that I gave you, because you'll see, that's pretty hard to see up there on the screen, but that's a graphic of the evaluation process in the state of Ohio. And it's pretty complex, and I'm going to try to touch on some of the highlights now, but I wanted you to have that handout because I knew there's no way you'd be able to see it on the screen up there. If you go to the first slide, Rob, the first thing that has to happen is that a student has to be referred or requested for an evaluation. That can be done by the parent, by somebody in the school, or any public agency. And the purpose of an initial evaluation is to determine if that student is a child with a disability as defined by IDEA, and that means that it has to fall into one of the disability categories that you see on the screen. A second purpose is to gather information that's going to help that team determine the child's educational needs. And then finally, it's going to guide decision-making about appropriate programming for that child. If you can go to the next slide, if teams review that referral, they examine the available data, and if they suspect a disability, the next step is to provide the parents with prior written notice, is what we call it. That lets the parents know that the district has decided to evaluate. They obtain parent consent, and then they will conduct a full evaluation within the next 60 days. Another option is that the district could decide that they don't suspect a disability and choose not to evaluate the student. And in that case, they also let the parents know of that decision through a prior written notice. So assuming that the district decides the student needs to be evaluated, they will conduct a full and individual evaluation for every child. So depending on the disability that is suspected, this can include things like evaluating the student's health, their vision and hearing, their social emotional status, their intelligence levels, academic performance, communication, motor skills. Any of those things are open. And the way that they do the evaluation is by reviewing existing data and by gathering information through new assessments if needed. Once that is done, on the next slide, through that process, this is super important. We have to, as a district, make sure that we are ensuring that the assessment tools that we use are not racially or culturally biased. So part of what we have to ensure is that the evaluation is conducted in the way that the student is used to communicating. So that could be another language, it could be sign language, it could be augmentative or alternative communication. All of that has to be taken into consideration so that we are actually evaluating the child's needs and not identifying them on anything that is part of their disability. Now, once the student is determined to be, once the evaluation is complete, the team comes together to decide if that available data is enough to determine that the student has a disability. So it's a whole team decision that includes the parents. They come together. The assessment results are explained by the people on the team who are the experts in that area. And if the evaluation results indicate that that child meets one of the definitions of those categories of disabilities that we saw, then that student is determined to be eligible and they become a student with a disability, and an individual education program is developed. So that, on the next screen, the team comes back together and uses the results of that evaluation plan that they made to develop a plan for that child's education. That plan is reviewed annually, and once the initial evaluation is done, students are reevaluated every 3 years to determine that they continue to be eligible for services as a student with a disability. So that is the process, but what I wanted to also show you on the next slide is that the Office for Exceptional Children monitors all school districts in the state of Ohio very closely in everything we do, pretty much. But we are also evaluated annually on 20 different indicators that fall under these 5 specific areas. One of the things that's monitored very closely is the identification of students. And there are super strict rules for compliance. You basically are compliant or you're not. There's no in between. And one of the areas that we have to provide data on is determining whether there is significant disproportionality based on race and ethnicity, both in overall identification of students with disabilities and within the specific disability categories. So if you could go to the next slide, on our most recent, we call it the Special Education Report Card, CPS got a rating of 4 and meets requirements, which, although it doesn't sound like much, is the highest rating that you can get. Yes, and that is the same rating that we've earned for the past 5 years, which is that's how far back the records go to show that. But what I want to point out, if you could see on the bottom of this slide, like I said before, the only rating that you can get is either a 4 or a 1. There's no in between. You are either completely, totally, and 100% compliant, or you miss one thing and you are totally out of compliance. So it's very hard to earn a 4 on this. So we have some really good teams out there doing good work. I also wanted you to see just how many evaluations are done in a typical year. These are only initial evaluations. This does not include those 3-year reevaluations that I talked about. The first column shows the number of individual evaluations that were completed, and the right column shows the students that were found to be not eligible at the end of the process. So what this shows is that those small numbers over there indicate that we're doing a good job of screening this out at the beginning and not referring too many students for evaluation unnecessarily. Otherwise, those numbers on the right would be much higher. And finally, just as we did for the other ones, just an idea of how many students with disabilities we serve in the district. And I always like to point out specifically our students in separate facilities and satellite locations so that we don't forget that there are more students out there than we see in our buildings every day. That's all that I have for you today. Do you have any questions? Committee member Lindy, to get it out.
Thanks, Chair Bowers. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I want to apologize also for walking in just a few minutes late. And so if anything I ask is what you covered at the beginning, please just let me know. But I wanted to, I think, also to say congratulations on the highest state rating. That's a wonderful testament, I think, to the work you're doing for children. I think this is my older sister teaches in Cincinnati Public Schools. My younger sister taught in Washington, D.C. and Chicago, but she was a special education teacher. And so I think all of these issues, I think, are very close to our hearts. And just want to say thank you for all the work that you're doing. I think most of my questions were on things, this may be for Pam, but is this like last time? This is a scheduled report that we get as part of the work plan for SAC. It's not like something happened or there's something that we're trying to figure out. This is part of the regular updates that we receive. That's great. And when you all think about your work, what kind of goals do you all have for a given school year?
That is a fantastic question, and we have tried this year to align our goals to the state's Each Child Means Each Child plan, which is their strategic plan for students with disabilities. And they have three main areas of focus, which are to make sure that you have a solid multi-tiered systems of support framework in your district, or MTSS. To make sure, the second part focuses on staffing and making sure that your teachers are prepared when they enter and you continue to give them professional development. And then the third area is to focus heavily on post-secondary transition for students with disabilities and making sure that they're prepared for life after high school. So we've built our plans around those three goals as well.
And it was a multi-tiered support, staffing, and then like staff preparedness, and then post-secondary transition. And this is just, I'm learning a lot of this for the first time. Can you just talk a little bit about how those things get measured?
Okay, so the multi-tiered systems of support is measured probably too many ways to talk about, but one of the ways is part of the reason is that part of it is the slide we showed with the number of referrals. So if we were not doing a very good job of supporting our students through those tiers before they get to the evaluation process, what would happen is if they got to the end of it, we would have a lot more students who were referred based on percentages that we've seen in other districts, and a lot more of them would end up being not eligible than are, because what would be found was that they didn't receive some of those supports in place, so they don't qualify as a student with disability. So we would have a lot more initial evaluations. That's one way. And the other way is through continuous progress monitoring of students, how they're working towards their goals, as well as the benchmarks that we use to determine how they're progressing towards standards mastery and the core content. Oh, and then, so staffing is, we have started to look at, I will admit that this is newer work, but I've started to work with the talent development team on looking at, I've started looking specifically at special education teachers, the retention numbers that we have for them and the reasons why they left. And we have a plan in place that we're using to work with our new staff. And we are collecting data every month on them on what they need from us, how we can support those in them needs, and kind of what their plans are for the upcoming year. And then, that's a post-secondary. There's just a lot that we do in these areas.
This is great. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
So it's hard to think of all the ways that we measure this. But so every student with a disability has, there is an entire section in their IEP that's devoted to transition. And as soon as a student turns 14, that is something that the team looks at every year, and it's very, very detailed. And it outlines specific goals that the student has to make sure that they are prepared for post-secondary education, for their career, and for independent living. So those goals are, we have automatic data on all of those students because those goals are reviewed annually, and we have progress reports that we do 8 times a year on those students. Oh, yes.
This is great. Thank you. I think just the very last question there was on that last one for post-secondary transition. This is just information I don't know yet, but what I heard you say was that we get good information from all the IEP meetings for kids who are 14 and up for what the transition plan is and whether or not we're basically on track.
So we have data on every individual student on whether they're on track to meet those goals. 8 times a year, we do progress reports, so we have that data. But I guess I could also add that we are part of Ohio's longitudinal study on the post-secondary outcomes for students with disabilities, and we actually reach out to, we have data on what our students are doing after they leave us for several years down the line as well. That's in conjunction with the University of Toledo.
Thank you for all this information. I think my very last one is, can we be helpful?
I'm happy to talk about this.
Is there anything that we or the board could do that would be helpful for you all?
continue to support us in the way that you have in the past. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. I just have a first kudos. The process is extensive, and I've worked alongside many school psychologists in this process, and it's very intense. The question that I have is, with the high number of IEPs that we have, what is the percentage, or is it a large identifiable percentage of families who may miss their review and whose students fall off of their IEPs, who really need them?
Okay. Well, any students falling off is too large of a number, but we don't. It's pretty hard for that to happen because of these extensive monitoring systems. Our own internal system that we use, EdPlan, which connects to EMIS, gives us more information than we would like on when things are overdue and when a student enrolls. We have the ability to connect to state systems, and we can see, even if we don't have something on them, we can see if they were identified as a student with a disability in another district. So it's pretty hard for us to lose track of a student. And once the student is initially identified, the parents have to agree to that. We have to get that agreement. But once they are identified as a student with a disability and that initial IEP has been written, we can continue to go on just as a school team. Obviously, we want parents to be involved, and we make as many efforts as we can to do that. But if those efforts are not successful, we continue to provide the services and we go on with that.
That's good to hear. And the last, I'm glad to hear about the independent living for our students as they transition out of high school. That's very important to me, them being able to have the life skills and the abilities to be self-sufficient and have autonomy. But that last slide where you talked about separate facilities, the numbers seem low to me. As far as the students receiving those supports. And I want to ask, is this inclusive of the parochial schools and alternative settings where students that are our students, but they may be at a different setting because of maybe behavioral or other concerns? Is that number inclusive of both?
Yes. Yes, it is. And there are also, that actually, if you were to look at our official number of students with disabilities, probably through EMIS, it would actually be a little higher than that. I did not include on there students with disabilities who we are their district of residence, but they may be served outside of the district by people who are not on our staff. So just for various reasons, too many to get into, that can happen. Those are specifically students that our staff serves in buildings for a variety of reasons.
Okay. All righty. Thank you. Committee Member Bolton. Came in at the end.
Not including that would help explain those numbers. Is that true? I mean, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All righty. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to Ms. Morales.
Madam Chair.
Placement.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I apologize for interrupting. We're having an issue where participants cannot raise their hand to let us know they can speak. So they'll have to message us to let us know they would like to speak this afternoon.
Okay, so they cannot raise their hand?
They cannot raise their hand virtually, so they'll have to physically message us through this system to let us know they want to speak this afternoon.
Okay, any speakers that are interested in speaking, we do not have the ability for you to observe you raising your hand today. So if you could messenger us, letting us know when you want to speak, that would be helpful. Thank you. All right, Ms. Morales.
Hello, everyone. I am Sarah Morales, Curriculum Manager for World Languages, and I am here with my colleague Craig Hoover, who is our AP Access Coordinator, and he's going to start off our presentation today.
Thank you. Just to provide some context and background before we get into some of the current data that drives and motivates us around our work is the AP access and opportunity for all students in our district. So going back to some numbers, we recognized in the years past, specifically the 14-15 school year, that fewer than 10% of our students had an opportunity to take AP courses. We knew across the district there were students in every building that should have opportunities for these AP courses and could excel in them. We put this work into place And happy to say that initially we advanced by 12% up to the 21.6 range. And that's the easy part, I want to say. That's the immediate things that you can put into place. Since then, I want to say through the hard work of many people and the support of everyone from people in this building to the buildings all across the district and teachers, parents, families, students, community members, we were able to make slow and steady progress in both enrollment and performance at up to 8% across that time from 16 to the 2021 school year. And I'm pleased to say it was both performance and enrollment that shows that we both have opportunity and access for students, but also challenging and supportive ways to motivate them and ensure that the scores are what they want and what we'd like them to get. And that's done, as you see in the second bullet, through supported efforts and supported enrollment, teacher training, and building support. And this happens at every level with the support of everyone, from the community to the leadership, to the board, to principals, teachers, and everyone. So bringing us up to the spring 2021 data, we have seen a decrease in performance of 9%, 65 to 56. National scores, however, decreased 7% with that same year. So 9% to 7%. The two things that I feel compelled to point out is we do not engage in gatekeeping. That is something that when I have the opportunity to speak to other districts or serve on committees across the country relative to our advanced placement program, I'm very proud to say that we do not involve ourselves or engage in the gatekeeping that a number of other districts do. Gatekeeping, meaning there is a number and a list of subscribed and prescribed and ways to ensure that they get the enrollment and the performance they want. Without going into great detail, our policy for advanced placement students is simply, if you're on track to graduate and you want to work hard, we want you in the class. And then what we do is we support them and the teachers beyond that. Also, during that time, obviously, we were on virtual instruction. That offered some challenges as well. But I would like to say that the level of engagement that teachers were able to get from students, the opportunities that they saw through that, and the creative and innovative ways that they were able to meet the needs of their students was absolutely commendable. And I would be far remiss if I didn't mention that for them. Enrollment is currently at 28%. Currently at 26, from a high of 31% in the 1920 school year. So that's an update, a little bit of historical and current as well. For that, I want to turn it over to Ms. Morales for opportunities for world language.
Yes, speaking of last spring, I also wanted to share that for the first time we were able to identify heritage speakers in several buildings throughout our district. These are students who spoke Spanish at home or in their communities to participate in an AP Access class with our traveling teacher and then to sit for the assessment. And we're happy to report that several of them did pass the AP exam with a 3, and we even had one score of a 5. And I am just ready to celebrate each and every one of those students for being able to do that with so many interruptions during a pandemic without the traditional background in world languages courses. This year, we hope to increase that availability of opportunity to more students through the increased proficiency testing that we did in spring of 21. So by testing many of our rising 7th and 9th grade students from our foreign language focused elementary schools, as well as heritage speakers of several languages in our high schools, serving those populations. We have identified 95 Spanish speakers who have the prerequisite proficiency level across those programs to be ready to engage in AP level coursework, 8 Arabic speakers, 5 French speakers, 2 Japanese speakers, and 1 Korean speaker. And with the exception of 2 of those students, these students are all African American and Hispanic students, and therefore keeping with our focus on strategic measure 1A to decrease disparities and increase enrollment for those populations. We are currently working with Human Resources to fill our AP Access Spanish position, which unfortunately became vacant just prior to the school year starting. And now Mr. Hoover will tell you more about some of the opportunities that are newly available at CDA and virtual.
Thank you. And even beyond the world languages, I also want to point out the opportunities that we've increased with the strategic measure 1.A with African American and multiracial students. We've seen increase in enrollment of 3% each year over the course of our work, and continue to work to increase their performance as well. One of the things that we are aware of is as we have students get 3s, 4s, and 5s, we absolutely laud that, we celebrate that, we commend that, but we also know that students moving from a 1 to a 2 is a huge, huge change. And the opportunity that they have simply to be enrolled in a class has both anecdotal evidence of support as well as data. Anecdotally, is we hear from teachers all across the district that just come to us and say, I can tell these students who are enrolled in AP classes because they, as one teacher puts it, they argue smarter. And I'll take that all day long. The other data that we see, and this is both at a national level and a local district-wide level, is the students who are exposed to this AP work simply do better. With all other measurements being equal, ACT, SAT scores, GPA scores, we know they do better later on in college and in other high school courses as well because they've been exposed to this. One of the learnings that we had during the pandemic, and there were several, was the opportunity to address the needs of students at CDA Virtual as well. And I'm happy to say that through some incredible flexibility of counselors all across the district and teachers all across the district and families as well, our 12 most widely taken courses in AP of the 36 are offered through CDA now. That's our plan A, and it includes both virtual and opportunities for in-person instruction as well with some flexible scheduling. And then the plan B for that for CDA Virtual is a recruitment of teachers in those more niche courses across the CDA course offering. So that's something that we're really happy that we were able to do as the public called for it. And it continues now. Supports and next steps are targeted in-building supports. This becomes the individual unique work that we do in each and every building. As you're aware, with all of our high schools, there are some aspects that we can apply all across the board, but a number of them come down to what is the need of this building, what is the supports that are provided that we can supplement, what can we do to provide opportunities. So these individual and unique efforts that we make in each building is a great measure of the learning that we've had. And then we can take that and apply it to other buildings that have similar needs as well. Ensuring this access to the adopted curriculum in the courses and the prerequisite classes that lead up to it has just been invaluable. This adopted curriculum all across it, I'm happy to say that as AP Science curriculum is being adopted right now, we've got a team of AP teachers that are involved in that as well. So really happy with that. Sarah?
Next steps regarding the world languages offerings for AP. Most urgent next step that we're working hard at is to fill the open AP Access Spanish position to serve the students that were identified in the spring as being ready for that course. And looking to the future, hoping to add AP Access programming for Arabic, French, and possibly an additional Spanish based on the numbers that have been identified. And including in those positions some opportunity to provide that custom prerequisite need that exists in some buildings that may not offer one of those languages at a lower level to build up our pool of students who may qualify.
And other programs and initiatives that we're involved with. The AP Bootcamp is a program that we've offered in years past that, if you're aware of, we would take students to local universities, initially started at Miami University, and then subsequently was at Northern Kentucky University. With the pandemic, obviously that wasn't an opportunity. I'm really pleased to say that what it developed into this past year being a virtual cross-curricular content-related book study with my colleague, Dr. Dawn Williams. We've had discussions about it. I could go on and on about what this developed into and the opportunities that a number of our students and our teachers had and the learnings that, when our back was up against the wall and we said we still want to serve these students and provide them opportunities in the summer with AP Bootcamp. This came with a partnership with the Mercantile Library, which I'm really pleased about. It provides our students with access to members in that library, and I'm really pleased with how that went. And whether or not it looks exactly the same this coming summer, I can't say, but I can say easily a piece of it and the lessons we learned from it will be something that we implement going forward. The STEM Power partnership that we have with the Cincinnati Women's Club, that's been wonderful. We've got 5 schools across the district that are involved in that, with a small number, and that is young women who show an opportunity or an interest in the STEM fields with mentors and a number of opportunities socially as well with women from the Cincinnati Women's Club. Really happy about that. The Dater Foundation grants, they've been very generous with money and support for us. Another one, and this was also coming out of the pandemic, was a partnership with the University of Cincinnati's Testing and Assessment Department that I was approached about with Ms. Felicia Wallace. And students who felt like effectively they didn't get a good bite at the apple because of all the challenges that they faced during the pandemic, we gave them an opportunity also to take the CLEP test. That's another product that gives them an opportunity to achieve college credit. And we're going to continue that as well. And the learnings from that is something that we can then take to world languages and across the board as well to continue to provide our students opportunities. And then finally, and I leave this for finally because I'm really pleased about this one, is AP African American History. I'm sure our representative at the College Board is tired of me reaching out to him and hitting him up for this. And then they did announce that it would be ready to roll out in the 23-24 school year. So next year there'll be a pilot, and we have thrown our hat in the ring for that. And I will hesitate and hold off to say that we have secured that, but I'm being a thorn in their side to get that, what I'll say. Any questions?
Thank you. Committee Member Bolton? Committee Member Lindy?
Yes, I do. Is everybody nobody will be surprised that I have a couple of questions. A couple of things. I appreciate the open enrollment piece, so to speak. I think that's the right philosophy, and that's what's encouraged by the college boards. It also it prevents us from being crazy about, well, then how do the children achieve? Do they get the 3, 4, 5? That's not the issue, although we want them to. The issue is not just that it would count as college credit, but that it impacts their ability to learn and to apply that learning. So I'm happy with that. Are you suggesting that you identified 95 Spanish-speaking students? Could you explain that?
Sure. So between our dual immersion program at AMI, as well as our native speakers at Western Hills, Stater High School, Aiken, and Withrow, we identified 95 students who have a proficiency that, according to the ODE's proficiency targets for the end of each world language course, tested out of 3 to 4 years of world languages, and therefore are ready for the AP level content in that language.
And these are native speakers?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, with the exception of any students who are enrolled at AMI who were not native speakers of Spanish but have been through that dual immersion program.
Just seems a little low, but that, it's a great start, I would assume. On the CDA piece, the top 12 courses are available, but you mentioned those niche. I have some colleagues in other places that have said that one of the things that the virtual piece did for all of us was that it's an interesting recruiting effort, because you have a lot of people that probably have the licenses and what have you, and yet haven't necessarily gone back to full-time work or whatever, but that they are finding placement in the virtual or CDA type schools specifically just to have particular clients. And that, very frankly, kind of that niche recruitment or hiring where everything is virtual and could be more than that, but there's a real market for that among many, many people. and it could expand our offerings at CDA rather than necessarily thinking about full-time AP teachers and courses. I think that would be of interest. And then when you coming reports, will you be beginning to add, and I know we don't have it for the high school, but would you then begin to be adding the IB piece as part of this growth, this effort?
Yes, that the work particularly on the west side of Dayton.
Yeah, the west side, and it's my understanding the administration is committed to an east side version of that as well. So I think that needs to be up there with that. Again, anything that makes it clear that we are a P16 district.
Right.
PK16 for sure. I mean, that's also going to help our efforts. So,
I want to stress that the opportunities that the CDA virtual has in the way of staffing, in the way that we can serve students, in the way that becomes a recruitment piece for a flex day schedule type thing.
yes.
For a potential teacher. I'm very much in favor of that. And also what you said, despite the fact that I'm responsible for advanced placement, there's clearly a place for IB. There's clearly a place for CCP. This is a fabric, a patchwork quilt of how can we best serve our students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee Member Lindy.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by saying thank you for all the work that you're doing. I think this is so powerful and so important for so many reasons. I love, like Member Bolden was saying, the non-screening policy. I think that's just great, and making universally accessible this kind of coursework, this kind of rigor, I think just speaks to what we believe about kids and what kids should have access to, and I think that's fantastic. I also was particularly excited to hear about the AP African American History offering. I think it's exciting, A, that's going to exist, B, that kids in CPS will have it, and I think it really speaks to, I think, your department in your commitment to the equity and anti-racism policy, that we want to be first in line to try the pilot. I just think that's fantastic, and I hope that you can keep us updated on if we get a yes, when we get a yes, if you can broadcast that. I just think that's really fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think I'm glad this topic was on here today, because I've been trying to learn more about AP over time with Cincinnati Public Schools. And that's led me to want to just try to go through the data that I could find from ODE on what things have looked like in the past. And as I understand it, and I could be misreading this, it seems like two different things are true. One of them is that there are some really good things happening. More kids are taking them. You mentioned this. More kids are getting 3s or higher than they used to. I went through and even if you pull out Walnut Hills as like a selective enrollment school, there are still more kids taking them, and there are still more kids getting 3s or higher now than was the case 5 to 10 years ago. And I think that's something to be proud of. And I think, please tell me if I'm missing something, but this all just seemed like unequivocally good news. Am I wrong about any of that?
No, you're on the right track. Yeah, absolutely.
Usually on the right track means I'm wrong about something.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's over this time, a number of things that, one of the things that I think we all had to agree to during the pandemic was you had to see everything as an opportunity. Some of these opportunities had some simple challenges to overcome. Some were more complex. A number of people here may remember my push for psychology for all. It made no sense to me why a student who may be somewhere near a college at some point wasn't sitting in an AP psychology class as a 12th grader. That was a simple issue to overcome. Those sorts of things and the work that we're doing with Sarah Morales as well. Those sorts of things are opportunities that we can lay out across the district and support so many students that beyond Walnut, like you're saying, just support all of our students.
And I agree 100%. And just because I'm competitive, I looked at how we did against the other urban 8 school districts. And so we're doing better and growing faster on these things than they are, and so I think that's great.
As well as performance is keeping pace as well. I mentioned very distinctly that, when I go and I hear presentations from other districts about look at how we're increasing performance, what I want to know is what they're doing at the gate to get those kids in and more often than not, what I hear is gatekeeping. So when I see our performance and our enrollment keeping pace with one another with no gatekeeping, I'm heartened by that.
Yeah, I think that's
right. I think we can only get better. I want to be clear. We're in rebuild mode, right? We're in full rebuild mode, but the lessons that we learned prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic is going to make our rebuild even stronger.
I bring all of this up just because I think, like, at least in my life, it feels like we could use more good news in the world, and this seems like a place where there could be some really wonderful. I think that the other thing that seems true too is that, everybody wants it to go even higher. I think, like, when I look at how many kids are outside of Walnut, what % of seniors graduate with at least 1-3? I think it's about 6% today. Now that's better than the urban 8, but the Ohio average is about 14%. So I think, and so I'm very interested. The questions I wanted to ask were, when you look at clearly good things have been happening. If you had to say, like, what are the most important things we've done to make those good things happen? Like top 2, I was interested. And then the other question was looking ahead. If we want to go even further, like, most important 1 or 2 things in looking ahead. That was my other question.
I would say the most important thing going forward is supporting students at all levels to ensure that they recognize through the vocal interactions that teachers, family, staff, leadership have with them, that they are capable to take an AP class. They're capable of it, that they are prepared. And we do that by challenging them with the supported adopted curriculum. We do that by supporting them and encouraging them, continually challenging them, so that when they do get to the 10th grade, 11th grade, they not only see it as a potential option, but it's the obvious path they're going on.
That's what we have been doing. That's the thing we have been doing that's led to the increase, or the thing for the future.
I'm sorry.
And maybe my mask. I'm sorry. I was trying to make sure. That seems incredibly important and clear. I wasn't sure if that was what we have been doing that led to the increase, or what you think we need to start doing.
It's what we had set. We have been doing it, but what I find more and more is building it up. Is spending more of my time, effort, equity, energy, continuing to ensure that students at younger grades recognize that they are prepared for this, that they can do this, that we want them in this, that they be seen in these places. And I would say one of the harder pieces to this is that element. It's an SEL element. It's them recognizing that they have these goals, they have these dreams, but here is how you get there. Honest conversations. But here is what I'm going to do to support you. I'm going to have your back. I'm going to take you by the hand. We're going to get there together. We're going to make sure that these dreams and goals do happen. And that's a piece that, and we can talk later, but this gets much deeper into a mindset that I've lifted from Hassan Minhaj about the audacity of equality, that you belong there, that you almost have assuredness or an arrogance that you belong in the room. And you have that assuredness because you have been so prepared, because you've been supported and challenged along the way. So it's the place you recognize you belong to be.
Thank you very much.
If I can just add to that quickly, I think that is also a big component of our accelerated learning model and creating our classroom culture for excellence and safe spaces for students to be their authentic selves and learn and grow while having access to high quality curriculum and instruction. And so I think the continuation of the next steps is, as we're continuing to adopt curriculum for every content area in CPS, more students are going to have access to what they need to be truly ready for those classes and know that they're ready for those classes.
Thank you.
I'll just add a couple things. The AP program can continue to grow because work, as you've said, in curriculum has been improving and more rigorous. We still have to have more rigor, obviously, in the the 4th, 5th, and 6th grades, because there's not enough of it. And indeed, that's critical. I still think we need success centers at our high schools, because an AP kid is only as good as the people with whom they are competing. And it's very, very important that the classroom and the class set is at the level that, kids don't feel left out because they might be behind, but indeed are included in that dialogue in the classroom. So we need those success centers. And I will say, I'm very appreciative of you pressing on the African American AP, but the suggestion to the administration came from this committee to push that because it was being written in a magazine that indeed this was maybe a possibility. So yes, stay on it because they will select us. There won't be any question if you keep pressuring. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to concur with Committee Member Bolton about the rigor in our intermediate courses, and I don't think we have been doing that. We need to do more of that. That was part of one of my comments. But I'm glad to hear you say that students feeling capable and supporting them at all levels is key and earlier. I like when you said rebuild, and I want to add rebuild better, that we are in the mindset of rebuilding better and having more students taking not just AP, but also being prepared for College Credit Plus courses. And so my question I do have is when Principal Blair was here at our last board meeting, he explained that there was some prerequisite courses going on at the junior high or middle school level. And I want to know if that's going on across all of our high schools. I know we're specifically talking about some of our world languages high schools or students who have experienced or have been in world languages middle schools or pre-K through 8 schools transitioning to Aiken and Western Hills and Data. But what about our other 7, 12 high schools? Are we having prerequisite courses in preparation for AP courses in those high schools?
There are, of the 36 course offerings in AP, there are a small number of them that have a prerequisite that the College Board recommends. Beyond prerequisite, and I hope I'm answering your question because this is important in a lot of the work we've done, is the course progression. So while I don't necessarily see it as a prerequisite in the way of you must
getting
have
ready
this
for
and
it,
pass
right.
it,
Mm-hmm.
but this course makes sense at this grade, then this course makes sense enrolled at this grade type of thing. So I wouldn't necessarily call them prerequisites, but a lot of the work that we've done is ensuring that the course progression is logical and makes sense. AP Lang at the 11th grade, AP Lit at the 12th grade is a perfect example. Making sure that you've had the maths are a perfect example as well. Making sure that you've had your Algebra 1, your Geometry, your Algebra 2, that then sets you up for your Calculus AB, your Calculus BC. So it's more course progressions, and sort of prerequisites. And again, I'm not being evasive, but I hope that makes sense.
It does, and the AP Algebra 1, or Algebra 1 itself starts in 8th grade. So I'm thinking about middle school in general when I say prerequisite or progression courses in preparation of possible AP class in the 9th grade or 10th grade.
Yeah.
Not just 11th and 12th, because there are some AP courses that are 9, 10. Is that correct?
Yes. What's defined really as the introductory course is AP Human Geography. There are some districts that offer it at the 9th, and we've had a handful of students take it at the 9th grade. It's generally at the 10th grade, but that is sort of the introduction that begins their opportunities for AP at the 9th or 10th grade.
Across more schools than just the select? I'm thinking about all of our high schools.
Yes.
Okay.
We have, I don't want to get this wrong, we have AP Human Geography in all but one high school this year.
Good.
And the high school that it's not in this year, we offer it year on, year off. Right.
And the last question I have is regarding the AP boot camp. And I'm pretty familiar with the Mercantile Library, and I'm glad that they're working with our students. Is there any offerings for our younger students outside of high school to not AP boot camp, but maybe have an intense rigor summer experience like that?
That's been discussed. It's not, and I appreciate you bringing that up because then obviously that's a motivator, right? These are things that as we have this discussion, this dovetails with better preparation and support when they do get to the older grades. That is something that has been discussed. And there's a handful of counselors that I'm working with. As a matter of fact, I want to point out Aaron Kuhn at Euler, who's just an exceptional, one of our counselors, one of many, but she and I have had a number of discussions about identifying a number of students for those opportunities.
I look forward to hearing about that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right, thank you. All right, we will move on to Dr. Williams, math update.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. I think Mr. Lindy talked about how do we make sure those students are ready and excited about those AP courses. Ms. Bowers, you talked about how do we make sure that our middle school are ready. And Sarah Morales mentioned this, and Craig didn't mention it because he didn't want to steal my thunder today, but it's all about our accelerated learning program in these 4 core areas. So as we begin, next slide, please, Rob. Again, my name is Dr. Dawn Williams. I'm the curriculum manager for mathematics. I am so excited to be here today. I want to quickly share a couple of our celebrations. We are so excited to have our math specialists back and our additional 2 instructional coaches to support our accelerated learning for all students. We are now in year 2 of our curriculum adoption. We have a clear line of sight, and that's about accelerating the learning of all our students with surgical precision. We just finished our mini conference for our educators. 91% of our K-5 students have completed the Ready Diagnostic. 70% of our 6th through Algebra 2 students have completed the Math Diagnostic. We have targeted support to address our unfinished learning. K-5, we are using our adoption MyPath, and for 6th through Algebra 1, we are using Success Maker. We had a fall professional learning series for our administrators, and with the return of our math specialists, we had a summer summit, and our keynote speaker was Dr. Christopher Childs, and that was around equity in mathematics. Next slide, please. Again, I want to celebrate our accelerated learning framework. There are 4 core pieces. The first one is culturally responsive teaching and learning. We want to ensure that all of our students have a safe and inclusive space for learning. We have aligned curriculum and instruction so that we have high quality materials, resources, and instruction for all of our students. We're going to provide targeted support, and what that looks like, that is just-in-time interventions across all of our tiers, and also progress monitoring. This is our 2-week cycles of instruction. We want to make sure that we know where our kids are so that we can provide them the necessary support. Next slide, please. Quick update on K-12 mathematics. We learned a lot in the last 2 years. Our teachers needed information. They needed a one-stop shop to go to get everything they needed. So we have a new website. That website focuses on what do our math teachers need for the first 30 days of school so they can find curriculum, resources, and additional supports. We also have a section called Moving Toward Equity, where we are talking about equitable instruction, culturally responsive teaching, how to build relationships, and how to build a community of excellence. And we also store our professional learning videos there. Again, one-stop shop for mathies, our educators. So I know when Sarah and Craig, they were talking about, and what are some of those things that are necessary for all our students to thrive, what we really learned was that it can't just be academics. We have to also include social and emotional learning, because we want our kids not to just survive in that classroom, we want them to thrive. So if you see on the right, our K-5 curriculum has embedded the 5 core competencies of SEL and our accelerated learning evidence of success. The first core is about culturally responsive teaching practices. So we are providing teachers with support on becoming a warm demander, how to build relationships, and how to connect with your students. Next slide, please. So we have 2 curriculums in mathematics, K-5 Ready. And also 6 through Algebra 2 has Envisions. And also to address our unfinished learning, we have Success Maker. And if you can see on the right, everything is aligned to our 4 core areas. Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit about accelerated learning evidence of success. This is a one-pager for teachers, administrators. It says, how does mathematics show up in this accelerated learning framework? So teachers can find how to build relationships. How do I do small group instruction with my students? How do I look at my data to inform my instruction? And we also have a new tool, which is our planning protocol. What we recognized this year, the power of planning. We know that we want to accelerate the learning of all of our students. We know that there's so much to cover. We need to focus on those critical areas of focus. So we have created a protocol to support our teachers with how do you backwards plan? How do you make sure that you're giving every student and every seat what they need in 2-week cycles of instruction? Next slide, please. Speaking of our 2-week cycle of assessments, and again, this falls in our core progress monitoring. On the right, and I know you can't see it, is an at a glance, another tool to support our teachers and students. This particular tool shows how those critical areas of focus are aligned with the lessons so that we can ensure that teachers are providing instruction that is laser focused on what kids need every unit. And on the left, a couple of celebrations. We just finished our first 2-week cycle assessment cycle on September 17th. 90% of our K-5 buildings have completed that. 6th to 8th grade is 57%, and algebra through algebra 2 is 32%. And we also want to celebrate and shout out some buildings. Kilgore, Leap, and Chase, they all have 90% completion rate. So I'm give them a shout out. Next slide, please. Again, we are so happy to have our math specialists back. In our summer summit, our theme was hope and restoration. So our math specialists are going back in those buildings, providing hope. We are restoring the joy in those buildings, and part of their time, 20% of their time, will be supporting teachers. 80% of their time will be supporting students. On the left, I have shared some of the monthly professional learning opportunities that they will have. And also on the right are the schools that are supported by our math specialists. And so what are our next steps? As I said before, the power of planning. It is so critical that we support our teachers with planning. We know that there is a lot of stuff going on, so we want to be there to support them. We will have monthly unit planning. Our equity Math Plc begins this month. We have a steering team of math teachers who are coming together. We are going to unpack curriculum around equitable instruction, and then we are going to provide those PLCs to our math educators. We're also going to unpack our 2-week cycle assessments and our diagnostics, and we are going to continue to have ongoing professional development for our instructional leaders and educators around our 4 core framework of accelerated learning. And as always, we are going to continue to provide education and awareness around our accelerated learning model. Any questions?
Committee members? Bolton?
Yes, thank you. My ability in math ended at pre-cal, and my engineering career ended at that moment too. But where are we and how are we finding our math stars? Meaning the kids that are really good at math, it starts to show really early. And how are we identifying them and how are we accommodating them? Because obviously the country, country needs them. So where is that happening? And I know that one of our little ones went to, it's not so little, but still grade school, went to a kind of a math camp and I think it might have been out of Fairview or somewhere, but talk about summer camps that have maybe those sorts of themes would be something to think about, like the AP camp or whatever, where it's not even which course, it's just kids wanting to do. I mean, where are we finding them? And how are we finding them?
So when I think about the accelerated learning framework, and at the top of it, it talked about culturally responsive teaching practices.
Yeah.
And because there are mathematicians in every classroom, and we have to continue to provide that learning environment. So like you talked about, those bright sunshines or soaring, and that we can identify. So I think with a high quality adopted curriculum, providing those scaffolds and resources, I think that we can identify. And what my hope would be that everybody in the class is a star, a bright shine. So I think we are on the track for that. I think it has to happen, and it happens different for different students. So I think providing that safe, inclusive space where all kids can thrive, and then we'll just see all those flowers bloom all over the place.
Okay. And then the gender bias piece in math. Are we overcoming that? I know we've made great strides, but could you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, so one of the things that we are really focused on is student voice and equity of voice. So, and again, for me, it comes back to that learning environment where everybody can thrive, so that if it's a male or anybody in the classroom, that they feel like they can share their voice. And I think once we create that environment, we'll see that. But how do students, mathematical discourse is a big focus for us this year. Is everybody having the opportunity to share and be valued and be seen in the classroom? So that's what we're doing this year.
Okay. So we also examine our data as we look at the equity of students, gender of students in our advanced placement courses and in our college career, our CCP courses, our honor courses, to ensure that we're always having that in light, to have discussions regarding how can we make it even more inclusive as well. And so, although we may not talk about it publicly a lot, but it's a part of our discussion on an ongoing basis.
That's helpful, and thank you, because very frankly, at least my experience has been, and this is with teenagers, the math peer group is usually a much smaller group of kids going through school, and than, let's say, the language kids or the whatever. So it's so important for those math kids to have each other. So that, I think that helps to what you were saying, Dr. Brown.
Thanks very much. I think thank you so much for the presentation. And truthfully, I think it seems aligned and consistent to what we've, the good plans that we've heard about over the last couple of months around how we're addressing learning loss. So I think this felt consistent, this felt aligned. I think it felt great. There's no but at the end of this. I think my thought on what happens next is we should just look at what's on those interim assessments to see how that's going. And I think we talked about that last time. I think we have a good plan, which is to do it in the next committee meeting. So this all feels like it's moving along in the ways we've talked about. So thank you. Can we be helpful on anything?
The end of that, I'm sorry.
I was trying to say, can we be helpful?
Oh, thank you. Continued support and encouragement will be great. Thank you.
That's easy. You got it. Does everything sound bad?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think it's yeah. I can't hardly hear anything ever when I'm up here.
Okay. Open to feedback.
No, I think it's something. Thank you, Dr. Williams. The only question I have is, I'm excited to see also the 2-week, the baseline where we are, and I think these 2-week cycles. The first part of the cycles, or the MAP assessment or whatever we just did. will help us better understand. I couldn't remember from the committee. Are they reporting to us or to the board about this? To us, to our committee. Okay.
Well, I'm flexible. My
What do you
understanding
guys
from
think? You
last
think
time
it's
was for
board,
us.
is a report to us, or do you think it'll be okay? All right. The only question I have, Dr. Williams, is how is it determined which schools get the math specialist, and why not all schools have a math specialist?
I am not sure of the details, so I don't want to say anything wrong, but I can definitely get you that information and get it to you as soon as possible.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to share with you that you may remember that Sarah Brody resigned and moved to Washington, D.C., and we miss her very, very much, but I am extraordinarily pleased to be able to introduce Candace Wang, who has stepped into that role and done an absolutely marvelous job over the last 6 weeks or so. So this afternoon, Candace is going to share information with us about professional development. Candace?
Thank you, Ms. Bunty. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all again. My name is Candace Wang. I am excited to share with you our priorities for and approach to professional development in our district. Our focus as a talent department is really to make sure that we are focusing on developing folks in their roles as well as in their careers, all in the service of advancing our priorities as a district. So first I'll share about our priorities here. So really there's two goals. One is to, again, advance the priorities of our district, and the second is to really develop folks in their own career trajectory. So what you'll see on this slide, we've got 5 priorities here. First, again, that we're supporting the shifts and practice that enhance performance and increase student achievement. Again, we're aligning to district priorities, professional learning standards, and of course, the evaluations that we are providing for our employees. Again, we really want to be cohesive across the district so that our employees are experiencing something that is consistent across each of their different roles and responsibilities. We also, of course, are elevating our principles and commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, both through the content that we are providing our employees, as well as the delivery, the way that they're receiving this development as well. And as I mentioned, we really do want to focus on job-specific training as well as compliance training so that we know that we are in compliance, but that we are also focusing on both individual growth and development, as well as, again, what they're doing in that role. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about our approach. So again, we are focused on the priorities that we have as a district. Instruction, students with disabilities, safe and healthy culture for learning. As we heard today in our committee meeting, each of the departments really are focused on what the content looks like for their employees. As a district, we are thinking about what are the things, again, in those individual roles, but then in the career trajectory of our employees and how that will contribute to the outcomes for our students. Next slide, please. So what we're looking for, again, across the district is really to increase employee engagement. We know that as we've been engaging in our pilot years with the Gallup Q12 employee engagement survey, that increased employee engagement results in better outcomes. And so we really want to see that our development of our employees is resulting in those better outcomes for our students. So we are tracking the following engagement metrics as we are thinking about employee development across the district. So first, that employees feel that they have opportunities to learn and grow, that they're reporting that the professional development that they're getting actually is helping them do their individual jobs better, and that PD is also helping them to grow and advance in their own careers. We also, of course, are thinking about our people managers, and we want them to also agree that the PD has helped their staff both improve in their job duties as well as advance the priorities of the district. Next slide, please. So again, we are thinking about this by each employee group and grounding those in the professional standards. So for example, for teachers, we are looking at the OTES standards. For principals, the OPES standards. And so we're looking across these 4 groups: teachers, school leaders, central office administrators, and our support staff. And so when we think about developing the scope and sequence for our professional development, there is a common thread across all of these groups, but within each group, then we try to go deep in terms of the expectations for their job duties. So within each group, we are thinking about what are those specific professional standards, but also where then are the pathways either within that group or across those groups. So if you come into CPS as a teacher and your dream is to become a principal, we have a pathway within that teacher development that they can also think about, okay, what are the steps that I need to take? What are the skills I need to develop in order to get to that ultimate principal position that I want? We are working to do that in each of those groups. So again, career pathways within these groups, but also across these groups as well. I know this is a text-heavy slide, but we'll be able to share that with you so you can read all those things. But really, we are thinking about this across all of those different groups and making sure that we are trying to create a cohesive experience as we think about those career pathways. And really, all of this is in service of making sure that CPS Cincinnati is a destination district. We know, especially in the face of this ongoing pandemic, that it is critical that we retain our talent. And so this really is focused on ensuring that we are retaining our talent within, that we are developing, and that we are showing our employees that there is a way to continue. We're talking about it from recruitment to retirement to stay with our district and to continue to develop themselves individually, as well as contribute to our priorities as a district. Any questions?
Committee members, questions?
And welcome.
Thank you.
Heard your name a number of times. Positive. Sometimes you got to just check that out. I'm not a huge fan of very much professional development, as much as I'm a fan of good evaluations, well done, and individualized. But in these particular times, and particularly with our board policies of equity and anti-racism and stuff, is the PD focused, and I saw your presentation, is it focused on making better people or better teachers? Or, I mean, that's sort of a philosophical question right now. We're obviously you'd say both, but I mean, maybe if you talk briefly about that.
Yeah, so as we think about across those groups, we are thinking about competencies of leadership and what does it mean, again, both in that specific role, but just as a leader in the district, whether that's someone in the lunchroom or someone here at the central office. We're thinking about those competency level pieces and not specifically, and curriculum and instruction is thinking about, how do you be the best math instructor that you can be? But the talent department, we're thinking about what does it mean to be able to deliver that math content, or as a principal, what does it mean to be able to coach your instructors in a way that is, like you said, in alignment to our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism, and as well as how to be that leader in the school building that we need.
I think as much individualized PD as possible is where I am. I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Hi, Candace, and welcome to Cincinnati and CPS. Glad to have you here. I found this really interesting, and I don't have a ton of questions. I think I'm excited about driving up our engagement. I'm excited about supporting teachers and supporting principals and thinking about both. I like the way you said both how we can make shifts to drive district priorities and support these people and where they want to go in their career. And trying to find the overlap of those two feels, I think, great. I was just trying to understand more about how the PD delivery itself works. Are these like, I saw some of this on the slide, but these are things like, okay, I'm a teacher, I go to a session on X during a PD day, or is it like this is a one-on-one I'm having with my principal or my supervisor? Like, what's the delivery channel for the different PD?
So there is a combination of things that is happening. So of course, in a school building, actually one of the principal evaluation standards is that you're a leader who can have the capacity to develop the skills in your school building. And so school building leaders are certainly doing that on an individual basis. What we're doing centrally, and this goes also for our central office administrators, is giving those kind of pathway opportunities for teachers and school leaders. So if I'm an aspiring, even if I'm, just an instructional leader in the classroom and I'm interested in becoming a teacher leader in my building, we have that pathway for folks to kind of opt into. And then when we get to kind of the administrator level, for example, all of our assistant principals, we're having a 3-tiered approach where we're supporting our first-year principals, and they're all coming to first-year principal PD to kind of have that community, and then our more experienced principals, and then, of course, those who are right on the cusp of becoming our building leaders. And so there's a combination of delivery methods, and I would say the frequency kind of varies, but there are, I would say, pretty regularly kind of monthly touch points for those different structures.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Alrighty, welcome.
Thank you.
Just to our committee, and thank you for taking on this position. Contrary to Committee Member Bolden, I embrace professional development. I love it. I've been to several of CPS's professional developments, and I like them. They're very informative, and especially when sometimes needed. Just based on all the changes that go on in the district, especially around social emotional learning. I love all of that. And even the building level of professional development I see is very unique and necessary. What I want to ask about is when we were talking about the shortage of our special ed teachers, and I know that we do exit interviews here. Do you guys do exit interviews here? Is there some conversation around, do you get feedback from some of these surveys about something teachers want to see, and maybe your exit interview that's been identified that they may not have received here in the district? Is that helpful? Is that helpful for you in informing professional developments?
Yeah, so one of the things that is attached to our work with Gallup is we are having, we this year are hoping to implement both onboarding and exit experience surveys. And so we don't have that data yet, but we are eagerly collecting that data, or will be collecting that data this year. And I think that what we're able to do with that Gallup information is we are able to share it with our departments. We are able to aggregate it. Of course, it's anonymous, but we're able to aggregate it in a way that folks can act on that from a department perspective.
And I would just like to add, I think Candace is being very modest. One of the things that she has also implemented is a survey that goes out regularly to our first-year teachers to be able to determine what additional supports they need, how they're feeling in terms of their job roles, what we can do to support them both at the building level and at the district level. So that data coming back, I think, is going to really help inform the direction that we continue to develop. In terms of our intervention specialists, one of the pipelines that we're actually developing right now is a partnership with Western Governors and with CPS, where we have our paras who are deeply committed to our district, who may have some college experience, but may have not necessarily finished that college 4-year degree, who are participating in college education classes while they are still working as paras, with hopefully concluding in a terminal degree. And that we have our first graduating class at the end of this year, very excited. And then in subsequent years, some folks needed 1 year to finish, 2 years, and some actually 3. But with a look at having those people transition into shortage areas. So particularly around our intervention specialists and in some other areas. So very excited about that work as well.
So that's good to hear, Assistant Superintendent Bunty, because I think that helps us increase our diversity in our staffing as well, correct?
Very much so,
Thank
yes, very much so. And with individuals, again, who are deeply committed to our schools and to our neighborhoods and to our families, yes.
Thank you. All righty. Committee member, any questions from anybody, comments from anybody else? All righty. We are moving on to other business, and there were a couple of items. I think Committee Member Bolton had something that you wanted to talk about regarding Montessori enrollment.
Yes, just, it shouldn't take a great deal of time. I am recalling our last committee of the whole meeting. I believe it was our last, and we were very well briefed by Assistant Superintendent Murphy about the magnet and Montessori lottery sign up, what have you. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And just wanted to make sure that I know in that committee of the whole, we did talk and verify and I believe validate that the board is supportive of the East-West piece and wanted to make sure on this timeline, we lose a year if we don't start building that in at this time. We'd have to wait another school year. So just wanted to update on, are we doing it that way or how's that progressing, if that's all right, Madam Chair?
Just because I missed part of that meeting, could I get possibly get a 15-second recap of just
Yes.
what the key points are?
There's the board some years ago and the district made some determinations, especially about Montessori East-West areas, and there's certain elementary Montessoris could feed into particular Montessori high schools. Some of that was worked out, and been happening, but an awful lot of it is not, which is in part the imbalance that we have at Clark versus Gamble. And so as they are doing this now, I didn't want us to lose the opportunity to make sure that we are doing that and even expanding that.
What we believe we heard from the full board was for fiscal year 23, next school year, 22-23. So our current process of enrollment for Montessori High School is that we are going to have Montessoris on the east side, so Sands, so Pleasant Ridge, I don't want to leave anything out, would be going to Clark. Montessori's on the west side, so Dater, Parker Woods, I don't want to leave anybody out, will be going to Gamble. I did not bring the timeline, but I am happy to share with you. Following that board meeting, we had a meeting with the Montessori elementary and high school principals to spell this out, give them the dates of the application process. After the meeting with the principals, we met with the Montessori Coalition, which I've learned involves teachers and counselors, etc. Following that, we had two different meetings. Well, we had an orientation, two different meetings. We decided to separate out the Eastside Elementary Schools and the Montessori Elementary Schools. And we explained to them their focus on Clark, their focus on Gamble Montessori High School. We did explain and had questions around, I think our families knew this was coming because it has been discussed, a topic of discussion over the years. We did make it clear that we are honoring siblings wherever they currently may be, and we will continue to honor the sibling enrollment wherever their older sibling might be in school. We believe that's the direction that was set by the board.
Great.
Yes, ma'am. North Avondale to Clark.
And then the need eventually for a third Montessori High School.
This is it okay if I ask a follow-up question? This may be something that was talked about before. I just wasn't sure. Is there any kind of equity concern for specifically, like I'm making the assumption that Gamble and Clark are equally great schools. That if I were to pull up their report cards, if I were to look at the outcomes for students academically, they are both equally strong. So if I'm a parent and I'm now being told I can only go to one of them, that's going to be a totally fine thing for them to hear.
There's actually a board policy that prevents us from forcing families or students into lower performing schools. I think Ms. Davis might be the only one with me in here to remember that, but that's about 8 board iterations ago. So there's some limit, as to your point. The reality is that your address determines your elementary Montessori's, or should. Okay, although if you look at North Avondale, there's an awful lot of people coming from the west side to go to North Avondale for some reason. The others are pretty much a general kind of mix. And the Clark and Gamble, the report cards are in the status of stopping, but my last understanding about the Gamble achievement is that it was actually, forgive me, higher than Clark's. And that was dealing with even the kids that we kept at Gamble that were not Montessori. So yeah, but you're absolutely right to ask, because that is, yes, and it's a east side, west side kind of thing. But again, if you're going to Parker Woods, your high school is going to be Gamble. If you're going over here in the Sands or Pleasant Ridge or in North Avondale, you're going to Clark. But siblings are
exempt a
so
little
it'll
bit.
take a while to grandfather and move.
And committee member Lindy, the point that you made is good, and then that becomes our responsibility to make sure that it is equitable. So,
and Madam Chair, committee members, if I may, that committee of the whole was several weeks ago at this point, and I would say to you, nothing has come to my office from a parent who had that concern at this point. It's been a little bit, not that far, a little bit, and no concern about the equity piece, and you're forcing me to make this choice at all.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have one question, and you may be able to answer this, Assistant Superintendent Murphy. The attendance count and staffing and changing and several emails around that. Can you validate? Because I know that this happens every year. I know this is something that the district has to go through every year with reassigning and things like that. But there was a concern about a lot of kids being in a classroom, and then COVID concerns and things like that. And then the social distancing is what brings to mind for me the concern as to why this is coming up. And can you speak on that as far as if that becomes an issue because it's too many kids in a classroom based on the COVID concerns?
I think it would be best for me to say, I'm sorry, Assistant Superintendent Bunty had to leave because she's taking care of all the COVID protocols at this point. I had not heard that, so I need to follow up. I do think our attendance is pretty good from what I understand, so I will need to follow up specifically about a concern of there maybe being overcrowding in classrooms. Is that what I hear you say?
I think there's some concern from parents.
Parents.
And it's some concern, multiple emails about the realigning and shifting of staff based on number of students enrolled, things like that.
So that part you're probably referring to is TAC, Teacher Allocation Committee.
Yes.
And again, Susan, staffing. Okay. But that is going on right now. I believe pre-TAC was last week where there were conversations with principals where there were enrollment numbers of concern. So, as a former principal, I've been in that seat before, and I know it can be shocking. And you get your staff settled and you have to make a change. So I will, if it's all right with you, ask Susan for follow up on both of those. But you're right, TAC is going on right now.
Ms. Murphy, if this is also a Susan question, I can ask her too, but I thought you might know the answer too. The thing that creates TAC, or like why we do this in the first place, is that a state law? Is that the collective bargaining agreement? Is it our own board policy? Like what causes that to happen?
It's Cincinnati Public School procedure.
So we
So-
could, for future years, like if we wanted to do things differently, we could. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't. I'm just like versus like some rule somewhere that is imposed that we have to follow.
You know, our budget is based on the number of students we have. And so then the resources schools receive, it's based on enrollment and the number of students who are actually in a seat. And so that impacts our budget. And so if we have fewer students, then there may be the need for fewer services. And that basically is what's driving it, because then there may be a school B that has a greater number of students, and so they need a greater number of services, i.e. this generally shakes out by teachers, quite frankly. And so if you have 12 kids in one class and you can go up to 28, then you may want to put those classes together, have one teacher, and then send that teacher to school B where there is a greater need, strictly based on the numbers of students.
And that makes great sense. The only reason I'm asking is both this year and in years past, before I was on the board and since being on the board, it seems like it's always a pain point, whether it's for teachers or for families or for administrators. And so my thought was just, if it's something that we could potentially choose to do differently, it might be interesting to look at what other school districts do and see, is there any other approach out there in the world that creates less friction. I don't know that this is the biggest priority for me personally, just because we have other things that are also going on that are really important. But it is when I see the emails come through of everybody who's so frustrated with this, it just makes me think, gosh, I wonder if there were some better way out there. And that's what I wanted to share.
And I just want to reiterate that this drives the individual school's budget. So that is a principle. I mean, they have to balance their budget. So if you do have those 12 students in a class, you have that extra teacher, you don't have enough students to kind of pay for that teacher.
I'm 100% understand that that's how we currently do it. I think the thing I'm trying to imagine is that you could imagine other ways of doing it, where every year you set aside a certain amount of money in your budget to cover these things, so that we don't. That would mean choosing not to spend that money on some other things. But we could design a system where this didn't happen, if that were something that people really wanted. Just my.
Yeah, this, as the assistant superintendent, as the chair's mentioned, it does pertain to how we've been doing things for a long time, and the root of it is the CFT contract, which requires TAC, which is this teacher allocation committee, which is it's in the CBA, and it's become our practice based upon the CFT contract has determined our class size ranges, which that may be good for some, it may be bad for others. I think when we've heard from, and I was taken aback because I should have looked at the calendar and knew this was coming. But when people testified last Monday, I think they were from Fairview, and then later on we heard from Cairns, and their concern was, I guess, that combining classes and losing staff, and it would be disruptive to the kids or what have you. My argument about why I think they might have a little bit of a case on this is just because it's a post-COVID year. That are we really still doing 3 feet distance? And we've been told again and again, hey, we might be shutting down because of teacher attendance or staff attendance. Isn't it better to have enough people wherever they need to be? So I think I'm not a big fan of TAC, never have been. It's sort of built around the October number that doesn't even happen anymore, if I recall. But I think that's where the parents are, is the distance piece and the disruption. I'm much more worried about, and I maybe have heard this wrong, but I have a friend over on the west side that said, like, Reese Price lost like 5 teachers. Reese Price, I mean, based upon student numbers, that's driven from the top instead of, God, Reese Price, the more teachers we can get at Reese Price, the better. But I think that's part of the dialogue. And that I don't know if the unions even sign on or if they even have the ability to say no. So I don't know what that I don't know what that part is.
It's my understanding that they confer with the Federation and Ms. Sellers is at the table after an initial analysis is done.
Cool. Thank you.
All righty. Any other questions or comments? All righty. This meeting is official. Oh, I'm sorry. Hearing of the public. I was getting out of here.
We do have two speakers this afternoon, Matt. And we do have one individual who could not properly connect, Nicholas Holland. We apologize. He did want to discuss TAC, but he was not able to communicate or
Nicholas Holland.
to connect.
So I'm hoping, Nicholas, that you were able to get some information and that maybe his question was answered.
Maybe suggested he write something to us.
Could he write us something?
Not through the chat, but if he does through Phyllis, we'll make sure that
Okay.
your committee gets it. So we apologize for that.
Okay.
Our first speaker is Ozzy Davis, followed by Julie Sellers.
All right.
So Ozzy, I'm going to send you an invite to come over. Ozzy, you are on and you are ready to go.
Greetings, everybody. How y'all doing? Chairwoman Bowers, Member Bolton, Member Lindy, Interim Deputy Superintendent. I was about to say Rabbit, but I'm not going to do that. Jonathan Brown, Assistant Superintendent Shauna Murphy. I love you all. I am definitely. Can you guys hear me?
Oh, here he comes.
Cuts
All right,
to
let me
teachers
try
at
again.
this time. I think any cut to teachers at this time is purely immoral. Like, we have to do whatever we have to do not to cut teachers at this time. If this was a normal year, oh, okay, I'd be having the conversation Member Lindy's having. But this is not a normal year. And if our enrollment is down, well, having extra teachers will help us bring our enrollment back. We have to have different institutional thoughts. Thought determines action. We have, in regards to teacher cuts, there should be no conversation about teacher cuts. We got to do it somewhere else. Cut toilet paper. Do something else. We cannot cut teachers at this time. That's all I called to say today. I love you guys. I appreciate you. It was a great meeting. One more thing is, are we doing anything in the elementary school to prepare our kids for AP classes? I was moved by the AP presentation today. Guys, God bless you.
Thank you, Ozzy Davis. Our next presenter is Julie Sellers.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm sitting over here on this side of the camera, kind of chomping at the bit. I do want to talk about TAC. I think there are some misconceptions. Yes, TAC is in the contract, but it was to do proper staffing because in a large urban, sometimes you're not really sure in neighborhood schools where the kids are really going to be enrolled because sometimes there's changes in neighborhoods in housing. And so that allows the district to right size the schools on their staffing. It is an old practice, but there is nothing that says that it has to be the deep cuts of what the administration decided to do last week with balancing the budget. We could have left all of those kids there. I just got, and I have not received the transfer list of who's going where or when, but I do know where they do want to make cuts. And let me give you some examples. For example, the third grade currently has 4 teachers at Roberts. 74 heavily ESL students, with 4 in the process of being enrolled that are in the process of being enrolled. So that puts them at 78. So a new teacher, that would give them 76 students. They can only have 75 with 3 teachers. They've cut that. They've cut that grade 3. There is a second grade. So you have teachers who are highly specialized working with ESL students. You're going to cut, reassign them somewhere, and then in 2 weeks they're going to be overloaded. And then the district is going to say, we don't have any more positions. They have a second grade currently with 3 teachers and 72 kids, and they want to cut that down to 2, which would put them at an overload. The 6th grade is in the process of enrolling 4 students. The 7th grade is in the process of enrolling 5 students. There should be no cuts going on at Roberts. Reese Price, one of the highest poverty schools in our district, with some of the least resources of kids who fell off probably further than a lot of neighborhoods. They're projected to cut 5 teachers. They said that their projected enrollment was 542 and that their enrollment this year is only 521. I'm sorry, it's down 21 students. Westwood, they wanted to cut currently, there's 3 kindergarten teachers with 51 kids. They want to cut a kindergarten teacher. That cut would be that they would be overloaded from day 1, and it's a neighborhood school that can keep getting enrollment. Pleasant Hill, they wanted to cut 1 teacher. They currently have 4 first grade teachers, and they wanted to cut those 4 teachers down to 3 teachers and then add overload paras. Those paras would be phantom positions because the district can't hire enough paras. We're already 30 or 40 paras down. Cans was slated to lose an intermediate teacher and only have 1 self-contained 4th grade teacher who would be overloaded right from day 1. Now, I did meet with the district this morning because I just got their additions and subtractions generic list last night, and they are saying that they're going to add some positions back, but they have to check again with the treasurer's office to see if that's possible. They want to cut 35, this is the district's numbers, 35 elementary teachers, but add 8 high school teachers and ESL teachers, which because they're adding teachers in the high school, they say that's only 27 cuts. Listen, we could keep all the staffing the way it is and give kids the opportunity, but the elementary kids are the kids who are not vaccinated, and they are the kids who are the most vulnerable and need to have the most catch-up. Kids in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, maybe even some of them in 3rd grade, have never had a normal school year since the pandemic started. All of the elementary kids have been impacted, and there's nothing, and I'm sick and tired of people saying this is CFT's fault and it's in our contract and we have to do it. No, we don't have to do it. And at this point, it's irresponsible to do it, it's immoral to do it, and it's something that needs to be stopped right now. And only the board at this point can put the brakes on. It's a couple $1 million, and we received $300 million from the federal government to help kids catch up. Don't sit here and have presentation after presentation after presentation of how much stuff you are doing to help students recover from the pandemic, and then you're sitting and overloading kids into classrooms like they're sardines. I'm sorry, it's not right, and I will go to the media and go to the public if this continues, because I think it's absolutely immoral and wrong. And then as far as the AP courses, I just want to say, I just pulled up the AP course and exam pages. There is not currently an AP course for African American Studies. I'm really confused by that, but it's something that does need to be there. And I want to know, why if we have built capacity for more AP courses, why aren't we having more AP courses in person and not having those blended learning ones? We have 5 years of data. Let me see the comparisons, because there is not an AP teacher in the district who can say that their kids would score as well having a teacher in person 1 day a week compared to a student who has an AP teacher 5 days a week. They did at Walnut, the AP instructor said that no matter what, and their kids were enrolling every day in person, that they were not as effective online as they were in person. We need to get the data on this, and not just listen to a presentation of look at the things we're doing, but how are we going about making sure that it's done right. But don't tell me you care about kids, and don't tell me that you care about bringing kids up when you're making the kind of cuts that you're making. And so I don't know. I'm sick and tired of these meetings being virtual where we can't have a dialogue. I'm sick and tired of not getting the information that we need. But until we start working together and working with the teachers to find out what's really going on, we're not going to have the improvements that we need to have. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers. But before you go, Ms. Sellers, you were invited to SAC even last month. So you can come in person. You were invited last month.
I sent a text and I said, can I come in person? And nobody would respond. I want to come in person.
Was it today?
Yeah.
I didn't see it. I apologize. But last month you could have came last. No, you can come in person. That's why we're in the IOC.
Thank you
I think
very much. I want to come in person, and I want to be able to have these conversations, because I don't believe what is happening right now for our kids is what we should be doing. And right now, we are still in the middle of pandemic. We've had over 1,100 positive COVID cases with students, and they don't need to be sardined into classrooms based on our contractual class size. That is what I'm tired of being the blame and being the scapegoat for all of this.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers.
Thank you.
I appreciated her comments. I also appreciate meeting in here. And
I must text, but I think I invited her.
And
I invited her last month to SAC,
I was
but I think
fighting
she
with
had
Stuart.
something else to do. But we're open, and that's why we're having a meeting here, because it's more open. So, okay. So I appreciate that interaction when it happens. All right. Any other comments? If not, I declare this meeting adjourned.